Hi everyone, Krista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about Irish Catholic parish registers. Ancestry has more than 55 million records for Ireland. And recently, within the last few weeks, we have published 10 million Irish Catholic parish register records. So today we're just going to talk about where you can find those records, how to best utilize them, and then I'll give you some additional tips, particularly for Irish research along the way. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to start by just talking about how many records are included here. There are more than 1,000 parishes, and that covers every diocese in Ireland. They are written in English, but can also be written in Latin. So you need to be aware of that, and we've got a few little tools available to help you navigate those records, even though you probably, like myself, do not speak Latin. And then I just want to give you a reminder to always view the original records. So when you search on Ancestry, sometimes all Ancestry has available is an index to a record because that's all the original archive has made available to us. But in the case of these Irish Catholic parish registers, we have the original images. And so make sure you always click on that View Image button for a few reasons. One is transcriptions are not perfect, and so that will always make sure that you're getting the correct and accurate information directly off the record yourself. Another reason is because oftentimes there is more information on the record than what has been transcribed. The purpose of a transcription generally is just to create an index so that the record becomes searchable. It is not intended to be a word-for-word transcription of everything on the record. And so there's very often additional information on the record that's not included in the index. In the case of these specific records, another reason you might want to view the original record is because some of them have notations in the margins. Where these records were created by parish priests who knew the families and sometimes knew them for generations, they oftentimes would go back and make notations in the records. So we have seen things like on a baptismal record, a notation written in the margins of when and who that person married. We've also seen immigration information written in notations in the margins. So this particular person or family may have moved to America, and it will list where they went and what date they left on. So always view that original record. Now let me just show you an example of that, those records, and we'll look at the records themselves here in the actual database in just a minute. But this is from one of our employees. This is a marriage record for a family, or a baptismal record for a family member of his. You can see her name here. It is written in Latin, and so you'll see that you need to learn just a few key words in Latin. Things like born and died and married, son, daughter, parents, whatever those just basic typical genealogical record words are. You can see here her parents are listed as Guillermo Wise and Maria Wise. Those are their Latin names. Those are the Latin names for William and Mary. And so sometimes even the names will be written in Latin, so you need to keep that in mind. And then here is an example of the notation. So this is a baptismal record for her, but here is this notation of her marriage on an entirely different date, decades later. So be looking for those kinds of things. Now you'll notice some of these records are a little bit dark. They've got a lot of what we call background noise on the image. That's because these records have been microfilmed over decades, dating back to the 1950s. And so as technology has changed, as the quality of the registers have changed, we get different quality of images throughout the entire collection because the images themselves have been created, like I said, over decades. And so the microfilm has been digitized, and it comes out a little different quality depending on the quality of those original records. So just be aware that there will be some variations there. Now, let's talk about how to actually access these records, how best to use these records. You're going to find them on Ancestry, of course, and depending on where you're coming into these records, the easiest thing to do is just to go into the card catalog. You can find that under search. And you're going to just type in Ireland here in the search field, or you can type in Ireland Catholic, whatever you think is going to be fastest, and you'll see that those records will come up. So here we have these Catholic parish registers. You can access them through the card catalog, and this will take you to the database page. You'll notice that these records cover 1655 to 1915. Now that's particularly important for research in Ireland because civil registration, so government registration of birth, marriage, and death records, did not start until 1860. And so this significantly predates that 1860 government registration of births, marriages, and deaths. Now, while the date does start in 1655, the majority of these records are going to be from the mid to late 1700s, early 1800s, so keep in mind that limitation. Now, like every collection on Ancestry, when we have images available, you will see a browse box on the database page. I just encourage you, this is just a habit that I've gotten into, to click this and see if the location that you're interested in and the year ranges that you're interested in are even included in the database before you begin searching. That just allows you to know that you're searching for something that actually exists. So my family happens to be from County Down, and so I'm going to select that diocese and then come and select the parish that they happen to be from, if you know that information. And then you'll see here the year range that's available for that particular parish. And if they came from elsewhere before that, you can see, again, the year ranges that are covered. Now, when there are multiple year ranges, that typically just denotes that there has been a new register. So the parish priest kept the birth, marriage, and death records in a register. It's actually the baptism, marriage, and burial records in registers. And when they finished one book, then they started another book. And so sometimes you'll see those broken down by year ranges within a single parish. That's also really beneficial for me as a researcher because it allows me to narrow in or focus in on a specific set of images that I might be interested in. Now, again, one of the other things that I do when I first start researching records is, as I browse them, before I ever start searching in them, I browse them to get a feeling for or an understanding of how the records are organized. Are they chronological? Are they alphabetical? You can start to see how the particular parish priest recorded information so that you get familiar with the handwriting and what some of the limitations of the records might be. And so very often I'll just browse through a section or a segment of records so that I understand how those records are organized before I start doing any searches. So I strongly encourage you to browse the records first to see if your county and parish are included, to familiarize yourself with the records. Then you can start searching. And again, before you just dive in and start searching for your specific person, I would encourage you to get a feel for how common is the surname that you are searching for. You may think it's a really unique surname, or it may not be something that you've come across a lot in your research, but as you dive into records for other countries, particularly if this is your first foray into that particular country's records, you may have no concept of how common or uncommon a particular surname might be. So my last name is Cowan. I'm going to go ahead and just put that in with nothing else in the search box. And I'm going to click search, and you'll see there's 797 records for people with that last name. Now, it doesn't surprise me that there are so few because Cowans actually originally came from Scotland and were transplanted to Ireland, and so that doesn't surprise me. But if I put in a more common surname, you'll see 137,000 Kellys. So that's the idea, is just to get an idea of how common or uncommon your particular surname might be. The other thing that you can do is, as you do a surname-only search, is skim through the locations for the events. That will give you an idea about how concentrated in a particular area, region, county, parish, your surname might be. One of the things with Irish research is that a lot of times specific surnames stay in specific locations. So you can see here from these that my Cowan surname is concentrated almost entirely in Northern Ireland, with a few little exceptions. And that holds true as I go through the other, several pages worth of search results, familiarizing myself with that name. Now, one of the other things that you'll sometimes notice as you skim through these, as I mentioned, is the Latin spellings of some names. So you might want to do a few internet searches to see if you can figure out what the Latin spellings are of the names, the given names in the family groups that you're looking for, so you have those on hand. Another thing that you'll probably notice is that sometimes those names are abbreviated, particularly the parents' names on baptismal records. And so just beware of what some of those abbreviations are. William, in this case, is W-I-L-M. We've got probably Catherine, that's abbreviated as Kath. James as J-A-S. Michael, M-I-C-H-L. Margaret, M-A-R-G. So just get a familiarity with how some of the names are being abbreviated. That's going to become really important here in just a minute. Now, the other thing that you're going to want to do is search for your surname in a specific location. With Irish research, this is fantastic that we have all of these records in a single database that allows us to search them all at once. But traditionally, in order to be successful with Irish research, you needed to know where in Ireland your family came from, at least a specific county. And that still holds true, particularly for common surnames. There could be 1 million John Kellys in Ireland, and if you don't know where your John Kelly was from or who he associated with, and we'll talk about that in a minute, then it's going to be really hard to pick out which records are for him and which records might be for the other 999,000 John Kellys. So a lot of times what I'll do again is just a surname search with a specific county if I know the county that they're from. Now, keep in mind that this single database contains baptisms, which often have birth information. It contains marriages, and it contains burials, which often include death information. So we give you fields to search all of those specific events if you're searching for a specific event. But at this stage in my research, I'm really just trying to determine how common specific surnames are in specific locations. And so you'll probably want to use the any event field to just do this quick little county-only search for a specific surname. And what you'll see oftentimes is then you end up with a really much more limited list. Now, that holds true maybe sometimes even with common names. I know I've got a John O'Brien in my family that I'm looking for, and I've tried some of these same research techniques looking for him and for his family, just trying to get an idea of which counties the O'Briens tend to be concentrated in, because we haven't pinpointed the specific county yet. I haven't been successful yet, but we're still working on that. So use that any field when you do that particular surname search as well. And then you can change that up a little bit. Sometimes you want to narrow it down if you've got a big list. Like if I searched for all Kellys in a specific county and I still ended up with thousands of search results, I might then say, well, what I'm really looking for is any Kellys in a specific county where any event occurred in 1840 plus or minus 10 years. Just a way to control those search results. And remember, at this point, you're not looking for a specific person. You're just trying to familiarize yourself with the records, to familiarize yourself with how many people that have that surname exist in that time and place, so that you have an understanding or can grasp what it is that you're going to be dealing with. Just a reminder again, be aware of the parents' names and that there will be abbreviations and Latin variants of those. That's going to become really important when you start looking for specific individuals. Now, fan club research. Fan clubs is a term that I believe was coined by Elizabeth Shown Mills, and it's become fairly common in genealogy circles. And it is the concept that you need to know who your ancestors associated with. So if this is your first foray into Irish records, I would encourage you, before you dive in, to go back and review the records in Canada or the United States where your ancestors settled. Look at not just the census records and who their neighbors were, but look for church records in the location where they settled. Who did they worship with? Who did they work with? Who did they live near? Who did they associate with? Who were the godparents that show up on children's baptismal certificates? Who are the people that they go into business with? Know who they associated with, because typically, especially when you're talking about first or second generation immigrants, they're going to associate with people who are from the same place that they are from. These people tended to migrate together, or there was chain migration, and people settled near people that they knew or that knew someone that they knew from back home. And so collect all that information. I personally just dump that information into a spreadsheet for people who are not specifically biologically related, so they don't fit into my family tree, but I want to keep track of them. I'll just dump them into a spreadsheet that includes their name and any birth or residence location information that I have on them, and then some notes about how they're associated with my particular ancestor. That way I have this spreadsheet list of information that I can manipulate and work with when I start diving into the records in Ireland. Now, I've used this phrase before and I'll use it again, and the idea is we don't want to just be searchers, we want to be researchers. And it's really easy because there's a search form to just plug in a name and a date and a place and click search and get 3 or 4 search results and pick the one that we think best fits it. But you need to be aware that there could be several individuals with the same name in the same time in the same place. And that holds true in U.S. research and Canadian research, but it's even more pronounced when we start digging into English and Scottish and Irish research. There are just a lot of common names that are used over and over and over again. And sometimes those names are used over and over in specific families, and sometimes they're used by people who are completely unrelated who still may live in the same time in the same place. So having that fan club information is going to make sure that you're able to be more confident that you're finding the right people in the parish registers. When you start looking again at witnesses to baptisms, at neighbors, at who's worshiping together, all of that then becomes really useful information. So one of the things that you can do then, once you find a record for a specific family member, using all of those tips, just be aware that you need to look for everybody in the family. Don't just find the baptism for your great-great-grandmother. Make sure you locate the records for all of her siblings as well, because sometimes those siblings are going to have additional clues to other generations of the family, and sometimes they're going to actually have the piece of information you need to know that record you found for your great-great-grandmother really is her and not someone else. So that's how I do that particular thing. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do, or another way to search these particular records, is by parents' names, so without a given name for a specific individual. So for example, if I scroll down here a little bit, you'll see that there are some records for David and the children of David and Margaret, and in this case, Margaret has been abbreviated, and I don't know if the parish priest abbreviated it every single time or not. So one of the things I can do is I can just type in those first 3 characters of her name and then do a wild card, which in this case is an asterisk. That'll account for any number of characters after her, those first 3 letters. and that way I'll catch, Marg, Marge, any variations or abbreviations that may have been written or indexed. And now you can see I have David and Margaret, and these are baptismal records for several individuals. Now, every one of these individuals, this is not the same David and Margaret, but these three here are probably all for the same person. And if you look on a map and figure out where these locations are, you might discover that they're close to each other or not close to each other. This particular record here is actually, the mother's name is Mary, not Margaret. Now, I would want to go look at that original record and make sure that that Y really is a Y and it's not a G that was just mistranscribed. But becoming familiar with locations and how close locations are to one another, particularly when it is unfamiliar geography to you, becomes really important. So if you find a record, always look it up. If you find a record, even if it's in a different location, if some of the information matches, look it up. It could be the next parish over, even if it's in a different county. It could be the next parish over, and so you need to be aware of that. People weren't terribly migratory, but on occasion you'll see families that move within Ireland or attended a different parish for a period of time for whatever reason. So you can do those searches by parents' names. You can also do similar searches by spouse names. Like if you know, for example, that somebody with a specific last name married somebody else with a specific last name, and you're not exactly sure what the given names might be, or you can do searches by spouse names, given names, surnames. You don't have to fill in every field in the search box. That's what I'm getting at, which is sometimes less is more, and sometimes that less will actually give you more information to work with, again, to make sure that you're tracing the right people instead of just grabbing the first person that comes up in a search result that matches all the information that you entered. Well, that's all I have prepared for you today. I actually would encourage you to go out to the Ancestry blog. You can find it at blogs.ancestry.com. That's blogs, plural. And you can search the blog and just type in the word Irish, and you'll see this really great blog post by Juliana Zooks, who is one of our researchers here at Ancestry, who has done quite a bit with the Irish Catholic parish registers and quite a bit of Irish research both in the U.S. And in Irish records. And she's got some additional tips and tricks and some great information and insight there. She also has some links to some additional resources we have on Ancestry where you can find help for your Irish research, help for some of those Latin words. Lots of really great resources linked there in her blog post. So be sure to check that out. Again, that's blogs.ancestry.com. In the search box there, just type Irish, and you'll see that blog post by Juliana come up right near the top. Well, that's all I have prepared for you today. Until next time, this is Krista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.